I followed my dreams and opened an antique store to have adventures and spend time as a family. Sometimes you have to climb a mountain and open some new doors to find the treasures inside. This is our life, this is our adventure, and this is Curiosity Inc.
Good morning, everyone. So, last night I had quite the adventure. I went to a gentleman's house. I'd been there once before, and he had some amazing artifacts. And, well, this might be one of the coolest things I've found for the shop so far. We always try and carry a lot of different things and unusual stuff, but he had some stuff that just was really knockout. So, I'm going to show you what it is, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, and I hope you find it's cool too. Among other things that were there was this amazing miniature firing cannon, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about today is this little guy right here. So you might look at it and go, well, it's an interesting little bronze, it's on a marble base, it's got some age to it. But what really makes it unique is the inscription. And I'll see if I can get it in the light so we can actually have a look. On this side, it says, "A wedding gift to." And then here we have Sir John, let's see if I can get it light a little bit better, there we go. Sir John and Lady Franklin. And then the date of November 1828. So, if you're a history buff, you'll know that's a cool piece. The fortunate thing about owning an antique store is that you get to sometimes buy some really exceptional objects. And what's really interesting about this anchor is that it was owned by a very interesting man.
John Franklin was the 9th of 12 kids, and maybe having 11 brothers and sisters was reason enough to make him join the Navy at the age of 12. By the ripe old age of 14, he was serving under Horatio Nelson, who would die 5 years later at the Battle of Trafalgar, whose last words were either, "Thank God I have done my duty," or "Kiss me, Hardy." Sir John Franklin would serve in the Battle of Trafalgar, the Battle of New Orleans, and several other campaigns. He married first in 1823 to the poet Eleanor Ann Porten. Sadly, she would succumb to tuberculosis in 1825. It was then that he forged a relationship with his late wife's friend, Jane Griffin. Jane had been courted by Peter Roget, who would later write the Roget's Thesaurus, but nothing would ever come of the relationship, and she married John Franklin in November of 1828. During their marriage, he would be knighted, made Lieutenant Governor of Tasmania, because why not, and in 1845 made commander of the Northwest Passage Expedition, and that's when things went wrong. The ships Erebus and HMS Terror made their way under Franklin's command from Aberdeen to Greenland, where they dropped off 5 men who had fallen ill, probably the most fortunate illness they'd ever had in their lives. From there, they made their way to King William Island, where the Terror would be stuck in ice and never sail again. The men disembarked, and although they had 3 years' worth of supplies, they were tainted with lead solder, and many began to fall ill. Ultimately, it was discovered that the men had resorted to cannibalism, and all officers and sailors were never seen again.
And that's why something as small as an anchor can mean so much. An object like this tells a bit of our history, and it connects us to the past. I'm hoping that this item ends up either in a museum or with a strong collector who really appreciates the nautical history behind Sir John Franklin's missions and the legacy that he left behind.
But the anchor wasn't the only interesting item that I got from this collection. Let me show you some of the other treasures as well.
One of the other items was this vintage belt buckle. It's from the Calgary Stampede. It dates from 1967, which was Canada's centennial. It's JHM from the mayor and the senior alderman, DRH. So, very interesting piece, a nice ornate belt buckle, and a lot of people collect Calgary Stampede items. So this would be a nice collectible, and I guarantee not many people have something that was given from the mayor on the centennial year that's as nice as that. So that's a very interesting little piece right there. One of the other items that I picked up was this map. Now, this dates from 1823. See if I can get up on the date here. So this is Upper Canada, 1823, and it says Plan of the Principal Settlements in Upper Canada, according to the latest records to 1823. And it is signed, I can't quite make out the signature, but this has all the early districts and neighborhoods, and really all Canada was the Toronto area. It shows above Lake Ontario and stretching down, so it's just really part of Ontario. And there's New York right there. And you can see it would have said Lower Canada over on that side there, which would have been like Halifax, Prince Edward Island. So really, really early piece of Canadian history. And the thing that's interesting about this is that you can see it was folded several times. So it would have been folded and probably put in a book or somebody's pocket and carried around. Maybe a surveyor, could have been military use, hard to say. But a really early map of Canada. I mean, when you're looking at a map of Canada and that's all there is to look at, you know it's an old map. This was another interesting piece. This is a solid silver cup that was awarded in 1863. It's a challenge cup, so it would have been like a trophy, to company number 7 for civil service. And it's the Queen's Own Rifles of Toronto, won by Private Carter. Be interesting to see who Private Carter was. But lovely little detail there with an engraving of what the soldiers would have looked like, and I believe there's another one on the other side as well, facing the side view. So that's what they would have looked like. 1863, of course, Canada became officially its own country in 1867, so this is still under British rule. But a lovely silver cup and a lovely little trophy piece too. This next piece looks innocent enough. It's a little bit more gruesome because 2 people that have owned this have died, and hopefully I won't be the third. But this is a really interesting little item. This, you can see, has the Arabic Sanskrit on there. This was an officer's case around the Second World War for someone who would have been under the service of the Sultan of Johor. And, you know, this probably would have been taken as a prize by the man who had it last. And here is a little letter that kind of talks about it. And it says, yes, it was presently have is one that is worn by the officers in the service of the Sultan of Johor. And they were trained by British. But this pouch, the pouch, was retrieved from the body of a dead Japanese officer during the campaign in the state of Johor. And that was in 1941. So World War II, Japanese fellow had taken this from somebody he had probably killed, and then he himself met his maker and lost it. So a little prize piece that has ended up now in my hands. So this fellow says that when they open it up, the pouch contained a small notebook that bore resemblance to our field service books. The book contained military information in the form of Japanese tactical symbols, gun data, sketches, and other info. The book was donated to him. So that would have been an interesting piece as well. But great part of history, and it's nice to have the story with these items as well. Provenance is everything when it comes to this. Another interesting piece was this little Japanese cigarette case. So it's marked that it's 24 karat, or at least has 24 karat trim on it. This is an ivory cigarette holder. So as you can tell from the lipstick that's on there, a lady would have had this as sort of a fine smoking instrument. The cigarette went in the end, and this would act as a long filter. Very intricately carved, you know, with the dragons and the work. What a lovely little piece. And of course it has the matching lighter for the case as well. So this was probably a very fancy Japanese lady's travel case for her cigarettes, and make a lovely addition to our shop with the cigarette display in the tobacco area that we have here. And something else that was really interesting as well, here in Canada, of course, a good portion of it was owned by the Hudson's Bay Company. For a very long time, our country was founded on the fur trade and the beaver hat. Well, I have some original Hudson's Bay trade tokens. Now, this would be an Arctic token. This is probably from the 1940s. This is a little bit newer, different denominations. So when you trade your pelts in, you would take these in to the Hudson's Bay Company, and they would give you different goods for it. So I got a few of those. These are the earlier ones. These are the brass trade tokens that they put out. And basically, they're for beaver pelts. So this is good for one made beaver, so one beaver. And they would grade the pelt, and based on what condition or what grade of pelt they thought they had, they would give the trader, the fur trader, one of these tokens, which could be traded in for things like blankets or guns or black powder or all sorts of stuff. So I have a nice little selection of these guys. There's about 3 or 4 of the early brass ones and about 5 or 6 of the other larger stamped ones here. And these can be very collectible. People who enjoy history, people who collect fur trade items. There's a lot of Hudson Bay collectors out there as well. This is a strong part of Canadian history and really interesting artifacts. So I think they're really cool. I've never actually had them in the shop before. So something that's neat, I'm going to have to find a proper holder for them and be very careful with them, but these in a nice little holder will be a lovely thing to own and a great piece of a collection for anyone, really. So really, really neat stuff. And here's something I bet you won't know what it is right off the bat. Can you guess? It is an early 1900s hunter's trap. This is an Inuit piece that was adapted from an antique firearm. And what they would do is set it in the snow, they would pound the spike into the ground, and when something went by and triggered the wire, it would shoot the harpoon out of the end of this thing. Horrible if you weren't the animal of the prey. Hopefully you wouldn't want to be a person to get that thing stuck in your foot or leg, but probably a very effective thing. And looking by the wear on the handle and the wear overall, this was used quite a bit. There's a little bit of bone that they've used to use as a trigger. Amazing ingenuity. And necessity is the mother of invention, after all, and this goes to show that you can take something that was probably trash at the time and make it something very usable. He may have fed his family for years off of this weapon alone. Just look at this harpoon that this thing shot out of it. That is some serious business coming out of the end of that. So that would have been shot out with a shell and at very high velocity, and if that didn't take care of getting supper on the table that night, I don't know what would. But thanks so much for tuning in for another adventure today. I sure hope you like our channel and like our adventures. This is a pretty neat one. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well. And you can check us out online at curiosityedmonton.ca. But thanks so much again for tuning in, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye for now.